Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the BG Show. Today I'm doing a spoiler review for the new Netflix movie Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, Zack Snyder's new movie for Netflix. This is your official spoiler warning. Okay, so this movie was not for me at all. Let the discourse begin with the Snyder fans and the non-Snyder fans. Let me start off by saying I like Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a talented filmmaker. I respect him. I thought he did a lot of good things at the DC Universe. Batman is my number one guy. Anyone who knows me, he is probably the only person who goes, toe-to-toe with Star Wars for me. But overall, he just has weaknesses as a filmmaker that he continues to do over and over and over again. This movie is no exception. I have a list of things. Now overall, like I said, none of this is personal. I'm not one of these people who hate Zack Snyder. He's made a lot of good movies. He's made Watchmen. He's made Batman vs. Superman Extended Cut, I think is a good movie. I think Man of Steel is a good movie. He was heavily involved in making Wonder Woman. He obviously made the Snyder Cut. But these Netflix movies of his I have not been a fan of. I thought Army of the Dead was very, very subpar. So let me get into this movie now. The movie starts... Okay, so... looking at the marketing for this movie, we were told it was going to be adult Star Wars. We were told that over and over and over again, adult Star Wars, adult Star Wars. Dune is adult Star Wars. This is not adult Star Wars. This is a mashup of like a million different IPs into one. Obviously, Star Wars being a big one. There's some Game of Thrones. There's Lord of the Rings. There's some Warhammer 40K. There's everything. So the movie starts off with a huge expedition dump, which I hate. I hate narration in movies. It's one of the things that you'll hear on my channel over and over again. Doesn't matter the movies. It could be Goodfellas. It could be this. I just hate narration. I think it's lazy. So it starts off with Anthony Hopkins, and that's the first ripoff. It's Anthony Hopkins doing the Thor intro. Remember in Thor when it began and Anthony Hopkins was talking about it? It's exactly what they do in this movie. They do expedition. And essentially the bad guy is the Motherland, this is your second nod now to Star Wars, to the Empire. So the Empire is like the Motherland. And essentially they're going from, system to system or planet to planet, kind of wiping people out, consolidating power, doing all that. They do a lot of Nazi imagery, kind of setting up the bad guys. And our first set piece, they land on a planet, and I think it actually starts good. They show the planet land. It looks very like Halo, very Halo-esque, the way the ships land. And Corey Stoll has a huge beard. Corey Stoll from the Ant-Man movies, from Many Saints of Newark. I think he's in Billions too. And it's some pretty good stakes. And you're not really sure what's going to happen. Eventually, he just gets clubbed to death, and you start to realize what's going on. They're going to wipe out all these farmers, and so on. Let me get into, I guess, my problems now. So that's kind of the basic setup. And there's this warrior who is the main woman on this poster, and she's kind of a rebel, and they meet people along the way, which is all these characters, and it's a clunky story. It kind of, I'm trying to recap it now in my head. Let me go over now my problems with it before I kind of get back into the plot. So first off, Zack Snyder's... Usually the thing about Snyder is that his movies look really cool. You can always say, oh, they look cool, or they look cool, he has good cinematography, blah, blah, blah. I thought this movie looked terrible. I thought it had some of the worst backdrops I've ever seen in my life. They look like school plays, like you're on Broadway at a musical. There were some backdrops in the beginning of this movie. It looked like a Saturn planet. I'm like, I cannot believe how bad this movie looks. I think it cost $166 million for 2 movies. So, you figure about $85 to $90 million per movie, which is not enough. It's not enough for movies like this. Not, unless you make it well. You have to have really good writing to do that if you're going to cut out on the money. They have so Anthony Hopkins, the character, you find out the one who's narrating is actually a robot, like C-3PO. He was the bodyguard of the slain king, and he's probably the best part of this movie. He forms a connection with some random girl, and he doesn't do a whole bunch in this movie. He has one really good scene, which is when, and this is classic Snyder edgy, you can't just, to show the villains are bad, you have to have a gang rape scene, of course, because that's how Snyder's wired. So they have this scene, and eventually the rebel comes in and she kills everyone, and then the robot is I guess the suspense is the robot is programmed to not to only follow, I guess, like the motherland's orders, and he disavows them, and he does like a perfect bullseye shot and kills the last guy. So he's the best part of the movie. I wish he was in it more. He's not in it a lot. The other things that stood out is just a lot of the plot was just so clunky. It's just classic Snyder. You can tell he had good ideas. He just didn't know how to put the good ideas on paper. So like I said, the ship comes down, so it feels like Halo. But then the guys get off the ship and they're wearing suit and ties, and it's like, what universe are we in now? Are they on? Why are they wearing American type suit and ties? I mean, Earth like suit and ties when we're in outer space on different planets, and then the accents had no flow. Some people are British accents, Australian accents, American accents, all types of different accents. It made no sense. He tried to mix in. He tried to mix in aliens and robots to make it seem like sci-fi and Star Wars, but there just was no flow. You can tell, like, everything they did, every nod they did wasn't as good as the original. They go into a cantina like it's supposed to be Star Wars. It's just not as good. They even have a nod to Star Wars again in the cantina when the guy gets his arm chopped off. This time the guy is gay and wants to basically sleep with him, and then so the girl character basically stabs him. So that was a nod to Star Wars when the guy's like, I have a death sentence in 6 systems, or whatever he says in A New Hope. So there are just a lot of nods like that, but I don't think Snyder lands any of this. There's another set piece where in the trailer you see that woman, she almost looks like a samurai dueling with lightsabers. That was a total letdown. That scene came kind of towards the end, and she was fighting the spider lady, which sounds cool in your head, but when you actually put pen to paper and make the scene, it's not good. The set pieces, I just didn't know what kind of movie they were going for. It was so clunky. It was so all over the place. The robots were, a lot of times too, I felt like I was watching a TV show. This, I felt like could have been a TV show. And this is another problem I have with Snyder, is that Snyder, he kind of just films and films and films, and he has like no basis. He's like, well, I'll just film 6 hours and I'll cut it to 4 hours and 3 hours. It's like, no, he doesn't have a flow. If you're making a movie, it should have a certain flow to it. If you're making a TV show, it should have a certain flow to it. And he just kind of records and records and records, and he doesn't. I don't feel like he doesn't keep that in mind. To use a sports analogy, he's like he's like a really good offensive coordinator, but he's not a good head coach. He's not good at being in charge. He needs someone to kind of filter out his bad ideas as the movie goes along. The one thing I'll say is he is a good guy. Like Ray Fisher has probably had a little bit of a hard time getting work. He puts Ray Fisher in his movie, so he stays loyal to his guys, even if other people aren't hiring them. I have no idea how he got Charlie Hunnam in this movie. What not a terrible performance, but just a terrible role for him. I mean, I was going to say, maybe it'll lead to a bigger role in that movie too, but he gets killed with a nail gun through the top of the head. So, this is a very edgy movie. I think, and that's not an insult. It's a style of movie that I don't like, but a lot of people do like it. And I think a lot of people are going to like this, but I don't even think this is as big a Snyder problem as I think this is a big Netflix problem. I think Netflix spends a tremendous amount of money on these movies that just do nothing for the culture. I don't see, Rebel Moon becoming a fan base, becoming an IP, becoming world building, becoming anything. They kind of, and even when they do it with something like Stranger Things, they drag their feet. They're having a very hard time curating anything. For Snyder, I don't know. I think this is a good home for him, because I think if you put this in theaters, then you got to worry about box office, blah, 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 blah. So I think streaming is a good home for him. But I think he would have been... He just needs to make more streamlined movies. He can make good movies. He just gets too many ideas. It's almost like a kid who writes a school paper and just doesn't know how to organize it. It's just not organized in a good way. There are some good action scenes, I will say that, but you just don't care about the characters. The writing is so subpar. There's no character development, and I don't even mean to sound like a generic film critic when I say that there really isn't. Like, the story just isn't interesting. There's no real reason. You're like, I want to care, but I just don't. And yeah, that's my spoiler review for Rebel Moon. I will say watch the movie since it's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, just give it a watch. It's different than it being in theaters. Watch it, become part of the discourse. Those are my biggest takeaways to backdrops. Guys, I cannot emphasize enough how bad these backdrops are. If nothing else, just go and watch a few scenes and you'll see what I'm talking about. They're trying to show like mountains in the background. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So yeah, that's my spoiler review for Rebel Moon. Next ones in the pipeline will probably be Iron Claw. I still have to watch Barbie, and then I gotta put my 2023 best and worst list together. So thanks for watching, guys. Ranking out of 10, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say a 4 to 10. Just didn't do it for me. If you disagree, let me know why, but this was a dud for me. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.